Hello, everyone, and welcome to Passing the Torch, the podcast by Growth Mentor. My name is Marcus, and as you can see, I am definitely not in the studio. I'm also taking a little time off, visiting the family back in Chile. So, what you can see in the background is definitely something nicer than my regular place. Okay, that being said, today I'm bringing you a golden nugget. It's one of the best interviews I've done with one of our mentors. I talked to Mike Taylor. Mike is an incredible person, but someone who has a really special approach to marketing. That's all I'm going to say because you really need to watch this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, follow our social media channels, and enjoy the following conversation.
Hello, Mr. Mike. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. It's a pleasure being with Michael Taylor here, especially because um, Foti Nademan, when we were talking about like who can we invite, it's like you need to bring Mike in because he's the OG growth mentor. It's like literally the essence of what growth mentor is Mike. So I don't want to put the standards down.
It's a lot of pressure.
I know, right? No, but seriously, I mean, Mike, you've done tons of things. You literally have half of the years of experience that I do, but 10 times the amount of experiments and experiences that they're crazy. And I'm gonna let you talk about those. But I
Mhm.
need to start with my regular sort of linking all of these stories to Growth Mentor. So I want to ask, like, how happened that you end up in Growth Mentor? How did you feel that you have something to give, something to say? Just tell us about it. Like how everything end up in Growth Mentor.
Yeah, sure. Growth Mentor caught me at a really good point. I think I was looking for stuff to do for the first time in my life because I was leaving my agency, and I had founded the agency, grown it to 50 people. Actually, a lot of the people on Growth Mentor were ex Ladder
I
people
know
as
a
well. We
few.
kind of have like a Growth Mentor, like a Ladder mafia and Growth Mentor, which is kind of nice to see. But yeah, I went from running an agency with 50 people to then just like learning how to code. So I didn't have anyone like bothering me anymore, like asking questions and asking for advice and asking for my input on different campaigns. And I really missed it. Like obviously I didn't miss it in the first week. I totally
I
needed to
know the feeling.
but like after a few weeks, I was like, oh, I kind of like miss being needed. So really, for my own ego, I joined Growth Mentor. I think Fodi kind of reached out to me, but I think someone else on the platform, maybe Matt Eisner, I think.
Okay.
It said like it's really legit. You should talk to Fodi, and you'd have a good time there. So I joined and really enjoyed it. I did. I think I've done over 200 sessions, something like that
Oh
now.
my god, man! Like I'm
Pretty
literally
crazy.
I've been here for years. I think I have 24. I'm not even ready to pass the next stage.
Hey, do you get to count these podcast interviews as
I
sessions?
should, right? I should ask for reviews now.
Yeah. So I mean, it started off. I was doing, I've kind of got ramped up in some periods of the past few years, and then ramped down in other periods where they're super busy. But I've consistently had a profile, and changed that profile considerably. Now it's all AI stuff, but yeah, I've done a bunch of these sessions, met some really interesting people. I think I've written a blog post for Growth Mentor on like why I do it, but we can get into that. But I think really one of the big things is that it just gives me a lot of energy. Like there's a really big difference between taking like a client call, which saps your energy sometimes, and taking a call from a super smart person who shows up. They're prepared. They have interesting insights. They actually kind of teach me a lot more than I.
That's what we talked before with some other guests. Is that it's never a one way conversation. It's a whole learning experience that you get because yeah, sometimes you end up with someone with tons of experience or someone new or whatever, but there's an exchange. It's not just like
Yeah,
I give you and you get nothing. It's just completely both ways.
like I think what that's a mistake, right? Like I get out of touch, right, because I'm not like actively running campaigns anymore. So it's really actually a big benefit for me to hear from people like what they're struggling with, what issues do they have, what's working now, what's not working, because that's that I need to stay plugged in. Otherwise, I'm probably going to work on the wrong things or kind of have misguided notions about how the world works today.
Now, So you've been evolving on the sort of this, I don't want to say services, but the way you help, right? You started probably on the marketing side pure, and now you're fully going AI.
Yeah,
Like how is
that's
this?
pretty recent, past few months. Yeah.
So how did you change? I mean, is it? I'm sure it's not because just AI came up. I mean, you have experiences in doing things with AI from before. I know, like you guys, Ladder is like crazy about experimenting things. So how this evolvement or this evolution works into the stuff that you offer?
Yeah, good question. And I'm honestly still figuring it out as I go along. But the transition was, when I left the agency, I really wanted to get technical again, like kind of get deep into the technical side. Like I'm a marketer, right? But I've always been really interested in growth marketing specifically, and I just kind of see that or define that as like the marriage between engineers, like software developers, and kind of the product side as well as the marketing side, kind of integrating those two things together. And I'm always really fascinated by people who can code and like build these big systems that automate parts of the work. So when I left the agency, it was my opportunity to do it. So I did like a data science boot camp, Data Quest. I did that like 20 hours a week for the first 3 months. And then did some consulting on the side. And there were three bets that I made that were at the intersection of things that I knew that people needed based on my experience at Ladder, and things that like other people didn't want to do that I like to do. And
That's a niche. That's a niche.
yeah,
Something.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think you can make money there, right? And enjoy doing it for the longer term. So I kind of made like three bets. One was just analytics and tracking. Nobody likes setting up tracking or Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, but I'm one of these weird people that actually kind of likes it. Like I did it over 200 times at Ladder. So I got really deep. I actually set it up. I set up Google Analytics for Google once, which was pretty cool for Google Play.
That's like
So
making a burger for McDonald's. It's like, don't worry,
yeah,
I'll
exactly,
take your burger.
exactly. Yeah. I also ran Facebook ads for Facebook, but that's a different story.
Love it.
But yeah, so I was deep into that, and I knew how to code, and I thought this is going to get me even more technical. So that was the first thing where I was making money and helping people, and kind of like I still own the shares in my agency. I haven't sold them, so they're still going. They're still going concern, still growing. So I still have to work for a living, right? Like haven't sold out yet. So I was that was what brought in income initially. But I found that those services were really tough. Like nobody expects tracking to be as hard as it actually is. They think it should be easy to track performance of campaigns. It's actually really, really difficult. So I found over time, no matter how good I did it in terms of like implementing the tracking, it was never like the clients were like never really impressed. They were never like really happy with the
It's just like
implementation.
they don't get it. That's the thing.
Exactly, yeah, and I felt like that was like just going to get worse with iOS 14 and all of these kind of changes to privacy legislation. I started to go the opposite direction and go into marketing mix modeling. So that was the second bet. And marketing mix modeling is a statistical technique where you can work out your marketing attribution, but without having to track individual users. So it was, suddenly blew up. It was like actually Facebook released a marketing mix modeling library, like an open source one, and that really validated the whole industry. And it's been going for, people have been doing this for 50 odd years, but yeah, that really blew up, and that actually became then my primary source of income. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. But then the third bet was AI, and I didn't make any money on AI for like 2 years, right? So I was part of the GPT-3 beta in 2020. And I was still messing around with AI. I thought it was amazing, but like it wasn't that popular at that time. And I was still messing around with AI in 2022 when Midjourney and DALL-E came out, and Stable Diffusion. And because I was technical then, I knew how to code, so I got really deep into Stable Diffusion, all that stuff. And then it's only really recently that I started to make my first dollar from AI, like giving people training. But yeah, like I now have like an online course on AI, prompt engineering. It's on Udemy, and then I'm writing a book for O'Reilly Media on prompt engineering as
That
well.
will be
So
that will be a second.
yeah, Yeah, exactly. It's the second book. Yeah, and we can talk about that. That's another one of the bets I made. I wrote a self-published book as well, but this one's like I call it like the real book because the first one was just self-published on Gumroad, and it was super valuable project. But yeah, this one's like a real publisher, and it's gonna like hopefully be pretty pretty big in terms of their distribution network. So yeah, anyway, that's a long rambling story, but like that, eventually I got to the point where I was like, I know I could make good money in analytics and tracking, but it wasn't particularly satisfying. I know I could make really good money in marketing mix modeling, but I kind of reached a limit of like, if I wanted to get better at it, I'd have to get a PhD in statistics.
Yeah, that will take.
I didn't want to go back to school.
That would take a while.
So AI is that one kind of intersection where I really love doing it. It's moving really fast. Kind of feels like being around at the beginning of the internet. It's like a real platform shift. And I have like a natural.
Let me stop you for a second because
yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the prompt engineering, right? Like I not too long ago I made a post on LinkedIn, and
yeah,
it was this is before I've seen your bio that says prompt engineering, but I was making fun of people becoming prompt engineering because a lot of people are selling completely.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right, and everybody's like, "You're using it wrong." It's just become a joke eventually. It's like, yeah, you're using AI wrong because so it's hard for people to really find the value when a lot of people say, "Yeah, I'll sell you 100 prompts or whatever." And then you read them, and I was like, but I could have saved that. There's nothing. So what's really behind a real prompt engineering, not just someone who comes out with
I have experience like this. It didn't feel like my first rodeo when I saw this come up, right? It felt like the early days of growth hacking, right? Because we were the largest growth hacking agency. I think at least to my knowledge, we were 50 people, right? So and then growth became a sexy word. And then everyone was in growth, right? Like even if you just run Facebook ads, you went, I used to say if you can't push to production, if you can't push code, then you're not a growth team, right? And that obviously that feels a little bit snobby, but equally like it's very very hard, I think, to actually make a company grow to the level of expectation that growth teams have set, like the growth teams at Facebook, Airbnb, and all these other companies. It's very hard to achieve that if you can't make changes to the product, right? So I think it's kind of a mistake to flood that term. And I see the same thing happening with prompt engineering. Like the funny thing you see on Twitter is like people. The post always starts with like 99% of people are using ChatGPT wrong. Right? Here are 2,000 prompts, and I'm like, I don't need 2,000 prompts. I need to know how to make my own prompts. I need to know
how do you structure it. That's it. I don't need you to give me 2,000.
Exactly. So what I've tried to focus on is more defining principles. The way I see prompt engineering is it's about talking to an intelligence, another intelligence that's artificial instead of biological, right? So in the same way that you learn management science in order to become a better manager and kind of understand how to manage a team, I think that in the future, like prompt engineering, whether we call it that or something different, is going to be a discipline for working with artificial intelligences, right? So it's like management science, but for AI. And I think no matter how good the models get, you're still going to need to learn how to communicate with them because people are pretty smart right, relative to these models. We are AGI, right? Like and there's still like a whole host of issues that we have to solve. Like Growth Mentor exists partially because people don't know the best way to approach tasks. So they don't know the best way to approach situations. So I think being able to give that guidance to ChatGPT or whatever AI model you're using is going to be a thing, now and far into the future.
Now, this question, Mike, it might sound like a joke, but do you really think people is using AI wrong? I mean, are we really?
Yeah, 99% of people are using it.
Yeah,
wrong.
Exactly, right. But
no, I mean they're actually right about that.
Because now that you mentioned, of course, there is that space of, for example, I don't know, like when I started using ChatGPT, it was like, all right, give me 10 ideas for Facebook posts, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get stuff that it sounds really bad, but if you ask the right way, you can get way more than ideas. You can get a whole structure, a whole distribution plan, a whole strategy behind what you're asking. But it's really, is it? So the question is it really about the way you ask the questions, or there's something else behind?
Yeah, for sure. It makes a really big difference, and I think the big difference between what the Twitter gurus are doing with their 2,000 prompts, and like what I'm doing is that I test stuff, right? So it's very similar to growth in that respect. I can A/B test. Like I won't run a prompt one time and see, oh, the results seem good. Like I'll run it like 5 different ways, and I'll run each variant, 30 times. And then I'll look at the statistical significance in terms of like how high have they, like what parts of the prompt are really making a difference, and like what is actually getting a better result. And often what you find is, these big longs, like kind of, they almost like look like magical spells, like incantations, like you're some sort of wizard, using this AI, this malevolent god. Like I think a lot of those prompts are crap, to be honest. Like they're not. When I've tested them, they don't work as well as like some of the simpler stuff. So I think, that said, there are other techniques which are super important that people forget to do. So, like one of my favorite reframings here is, because you talked about how you approached it first thing. I think the initial approach that everyone has with AI is they go, give me 5 ads, right? Like, or give me like 10 SEO tactics or whatever it is. But you're not going to get great results because it's just trying to guess what you want. And if you don't give it much guidance, it's going to give you back the average of the internet, right? Because it's trained on the whole internet. And it can actually give you pretty much anything. Like it can give you, 10 SEO tactics that Ernest Hemingway would have given you. Something like, it's like it can give you like, Shakespearean prose, like, like pretty much anything it can give you back. You just have to kind of know how to unlock it and kind of ask in the right way. So the key I find is in kind of you providing the secret source. So like when I'm writing blog content, I won't say write me a blog on value-based pricing. Instead, I'll ask it to interview me on value-based pricing and then write a blog from that. Right. So like what people really care about is, your unique experiences, like what you know about your business and what you know about marketing or whatever discipline you're in. And ChatGPT can then expand that information. It can take that, that nugget of information that you have, that unique experience that you have, and then expand it to a full post or give you 10 different ways to say it in terms of, social media posts or whatever it is. But I think you have to provide that secret source.
Now, when you talk about the title, real or not, or whatever we want to call it in the future, is prompt engineering, that means the AI is not truly going to take over every marketing job. Because I mean, I've been worried about that. Like I already doing a plan B and start making ice creams. But there is a space for collaboration between AI and a human side. And for example, the example that you just gave is a very good one, that you're asking AI to extract your own experience into creating something. So how do you think this symbiosis, or whatever you want to call it, like how is it going to work between humans and AI, especially in the marketing side?
Yeah, the analogy I like to use is, I don't know if you've ever been in like say St. Pancras train station in London, or like actually they have this in a lot of the train stations, but they have a piano, right? Like and people can sit down and play at the piano, which is pretty amazing. And whenever someone is playing, they know how to play, then everyone will stop and watch them. But like if there's nobody playing the piano, piano actually can play itself, and it will just play a tune in the background, but nobody stops to watch that, right? Like nobody cares about that, right? Like so we've already made the technology to completely automate piano playing, but nobody cares because there's no unique human experience, right? Like people want to see almost like the imperfections, and so I kind of maybe stretching that analogy when I'm using it, but like I feel like there's a similar role for humans in a post AI world as well, right? Like yes, AI can automate a lot of the stuff, but that's just going to kind of free us up to fill the gaps in between those unique human experiences. And like whenever like at the end of the day, like I was just listening to a podcast, the Acquired podcast, talking to Daniel Ek from Spotify, like the founder of Spotify, and he kind of explained how music has kind of changed in this way. It used to be in Beethoven's time or Mozart's time, they would have to like be able to imagine how all the different instruments would sound, because they couldn't actually hear someone playing the instrument, and they couldn't do trial and error. Like, had to imagine it. So you had to be an amazing conductor in order to create music. Whereas like today, a DJ can play a few sounds and use the software to
Yeah, I
play
mean, if
the
you have Fruity Loops or whatever.
right.
Yeah,
So the like most musicians today like don't know how to play most of the instruments that are using their tracks. How many DJs know how to play the all these different instruments? Like, how do they know how to play the drums? No, they know how to press the buttons in the right order. So I feel like that doesn't make the music any worse. Like, I mean, some people might argue
yeah, that's
that, but
debatable. That's debatable.
yeah, but like it's still really interesting. Like, still really unique human experience when they do find that right combination. So I think that that's like not going away. Even if AI automates pretty much everything, it's going to still give us a lot of space to express ourselves. And I think it just kind of raises the bar. Like, nobody makes bad music. It's pretty hard to make bad music now.
Yeah, you need to be rich.
It's like in Mozart's day, it was almost guaranteed that you would make bad music.
That's a great analogy, though, especially like the one about the piano. Now, you started. I mean, I'm not sure if you started fully with Ladder. That was your first marketing experience, or
Oh, I worked in a couple of startups before that, a couple of growth roles. So I worked in the travel industry, a company called Travel Zoo, like a daily deals kind of company. I worked in ShopStyle, which is like a big fashion affiliate, and a few others. So I kind of learned paid growth, learned SEO, landing page optimization, that sort of thing before I started Ladder.
okay, because you've been sort of doing something very right, which is sort of smell the next, not trend, but the next right. I
Yeah.
mean, you're nailing that. So, what are you doing right now? What's your because obviously you're doing AI, but are you planning to create a startup around it, or you're just doing consulting? How's it working at the moment?
Yeah, good question. And still trying to figure that out, right? But generally, I try and when I'm spotting these trends, right, like things to focus on, is usually some situation where most people don't realize or don't want to do the thing. But when you do the thing, it gets better results than anyone expects, right? So I think growth kind of fit into that because actually, most of the traditional marketing people I talked to at the time when growth hacking came out, they were laughing at it. They were saying it's stupid. Actually, digital advertising was only like 5% of media at the time. So like even the whole bucket of digital to them was a rounding error. And like the concept that like you would put a developer in the marketing team, that didn't make any sense to them, right? And therefore and like no. So if you worked at Procter and Gamble for like 20 years, and you're like, you got like a reputation in the industry, you're not going to like change your LinkedIn to growth hacker, right? So there was a real barrier to like people wouldn't adopt it, but like the people who did adopt it were getting insane results. Like the Facebook growth team got the company to 1 billion users pretty quickly through a few different growth hacks, and there were like kind of instances where I saw it just like working really well for me as well when I tried it. So AI feels the same way, and specifically within AI, what I'm focused on right now is around the testing side. So we don't have all the frameworks. There's no Optimizely there's no VWO or Google Optimize for prompt engineering right now. So you're having to do it pretty manually. So one of the things like I was working on today was just kind of like an interface for doing that. It's an open source library. So I'm working on that, but then also kind of using that again. Most people are using ChatGPT wrong, right?
I love
And
it.
they're not testing the prompts, and therefore, like I feel like right now I have a superpower because I am testing my prompts. I know the power of testing. I'm just applying it to this new domain, and rather than kind of blindly messing around with trial and error, I'm starting to see what actually works and what doesn't. So as well as kind of making the testing side easier, I'm also exploring a few different product ideas where I'm finding a prompt that works better than average. And like other people probably wouldn't try that prompt.
So again, I mean, I really find it cool that you're finding all these like missing spots that are
Mm.
happening, especially I mean with anything coming up new. Now, how do you see it in the future, right? Like, I mean, we talk about how the relationship is probably going to work if you do it together between AI and humans. But what about next? Like, how do you think that's going to move forward into marketing? Like, is it just going to become a lot of automation happening, or there's something going to top what AI is doing right now? I mean, again, I like your vision into what's coming. So, what do you think is going to happen sooner than later with all of this working on?
Yeah, good question. I think if it hasn't happened already in your organization, like the real no brainer is to use AI for all prototyping of creative ideas. So, you know, I think there's probably some resistance to using it for the final production version, right? Like Midjourney is still really good, and they've solved a lot of problems, but you can kind of still tell it's AI. And same thing with the ChatGPT. You know, GPT-4 is really good, but in a lot of instances, you can still tell it's AI unless you do a lot of prompt engineering to make it sound more like you. Now, I would say, you know, that doesn't mean you can't use it for prototyping, right? Like prototyping is very low barrier to entry. Like there's no risk to using AI in prototyping, and there's a huge benefit, which is, you know, rather than going back and forth with the copywriter and back and forth with the designer, now you can like actually make the thing that you want pretty quickly, even as a non-technical person. And you know, even someone who doesn't know how to use Photoshop, you can kind of generate an image. And you know, even as someone who doesn't like know how to write copy, you're not an expert in that, you can still generate some decent ideas and kind of pick the ones that resonate with you. And then it's just like a smaller barrier to entry for the designer and copywriter to kind of access your thoughts, because otherwise they're just trying to second guess. Like when I say, when I say Batman, like you have a different image in your head of Batman that I
probably more of the old Batman.
So I say draw Batman, like you might like the comics, so you might draw him more like the comics. I might like the Christopher Nolan film, so I'll draw it like that. And I think AI in the prototyping phase can really help, bring those two visions together, and kind of you can show someone something and they can criticize it much better than they can imagine it in the first place. So I think that's an immediate no-brainer. I think it really cuts out a lot of communication issues between design and creative teams and the management.
Now, as a human being, do you think it's going to have a big impact also in the day-to-day of people? It's because obviously it's not just AI is there for business, right? Eventually, it's supposed to do something for humanity. It's supposed to be one of our greatest advances. Like, how do you think it's going to affect the rest of all of us?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a similar impact to Google, right? So if you imagine a world before Google, I mean, I remember pre-Google. It's maybe dating me a little bit, but before search engines, you just had to ask people, right? Like you look something up in an encyclopedia, which is really painful, or you go to the library and check out books and hope that you find it in the book, right? And you just couldn't get anywhere near as much done. Like unemployment is at a record low, despite the fact that everyone has Google now, right? Like, the librarians, there's still more librarians in the world than there were pre-internet, right? And I think that the immeasurable impact on people's quality of life, this is going to happen again with ChatGPT, with AI, right? And it's already affecting me right now. So, like I actually, I was just lifting some weights, and I was like curious, like what is a good amount to lift, right? Like, what should I be aiming for? So I just asked, like what is, and it actually gave me a really good answer. It was like, beginners should be weighing like this percentage of their body weight, and like, intermediate is this, and like the world record is like 2 times body weight, things like that. So it just like gives me a really good, interesting kind of context around this task, and like I've been doing a bunch of construction work in my house, and I know nothing about it, but I've been asking like, which type of paint do I need to get, for if I'm going to paint my room. So like it's already like a really big part of my life, like obviously I code, right? So like I'm using this a ton for building stuff as well, I think it just really takes away the fear of trying new things. I think that's the biggest impact. Because I would never get involved in construction stuff. Like I would just pay
You'll pay someone.
Yeah, because like, I just didn't know anything about it, right? But whereas like now I can at least ask and kind of get a sense of whether it's hard or easy, and then kind of outsource the parts that are harder or need a bit more expertise, right? And the same thing with coding, right? Like I'm building stuff. Like I would never thought to build my own open source like Python package before, but I honestly just said like, here's the script that I'm using. how would I turn this into a Python package on pypy.org? And it knew, right? Like, and it gave me like, here, like you need to add like the init file here. So like I think it just makes you fearless, because like what's the real downside of like just asking and seeing if it's actually easier than you realized?
But it definitely make a difference because you code. So ChatGPT is telling you things that you understand. And I think that's, again, that's why people is using it wrong. Because they ask for something they don't understand. Like I remember there was a founder of a startup that I was helping. He's like, look, I don't need a marketing person anymore because I just asked ChatGPT. I'm like, but are you understanding what it's telling you? It's like when he talks about SEO or Google Analytics or whatever, do you really get it? It's like, no, I just let him do whatever. It's like, that's not going to help. That's not going to help.
Yeah, do you know though? Like, I actually think you can get pretty far doing that. Like, I have friends who don't know how to code, and they have like whole applications like automating stuff, and they're like, I don't know, man, I just keep asking ChatGPT and it keeps working, And I think I'm all for that. Like I think it take away the fear, because it's pretty easy to hire a developer to make something work a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very, very hard to explain to a developer like what you want in the first place, or like the vast majority of all code written is just thrown away because the product didn't work out, right? Or it didn't actually get good results, right? Or because they didn't even finish the product in the first place. So I think you kind of need to treat these tasks as more exploration, right? Like maybe that guy that you're talking about, yeah, he's going to make some mistakes because he doesn't have an experienced marketer, but like, was it realistic to have an experienced marketer in the first place? And maybe he didn't have the budget, right? But maybe he can get to the point where he now has the budget through using ChatGPT. He's kind of, you tried all the obvious stuff. And then he can go to a more experienced marketer and say, this is working, that's not working. I've tried all these different things that ChatGPT recommended. Now what should I try? And then that experienced marketer just has a lot more to work with, and that client can now afford him. So I think it's really bridging that gap. It's not like replacing that experienced marketer, but it's like getting more people up to that level where they could actually become a client.
Yeah. So let me just I'm going to start closing the conversation because we only have certain time. But there's two things I want to cover. So I want you to tell me a little bit more about the books that you've been writing. What's your approach? Because especially like marketing memetics, you went really into the biology and psychology of marketing. I haven't read it.
That was a real passion project. Yeah,
but I started looking at it. I'm definitely going to read it now because it's like that's what I really like. It's like the human nature behind all the business. So tell me a little bit about that book, and tell me a little bit about the book that you're writing, and then we can move into the last.
Yeah, sure. So like, funnily enough, like I wrote a book probably at the wrong time in history, just because if I'd started it a year later, I probably would have used ChatGPT to write it. Do you know what I mean? AI really started to blow up, as I was writing, in the last few months, and I had to kind of change a few things about even being early on AI. Like I started to realize that, wow, like this actually changes a few different things about what I'm writing about. But it was really beneficial because the topic that I wrote about was memetics. So memes, you've heard of memes, funny internet videos, but the word meme actually predates the internet, and what it really means is any piece of information that gets passed on from person to person. So anything that gets imitated. So like you have like this fluorescent light in the background that says "on air," right? Like that is a meme because there are other people who have had that or similar to that, right? Fluorescent lights is one meme. On air is like another meme, and like pretty much everything around us is like from somewhere else, and that's what gives it cultural significance. And whether like consciously or subconsciously, you are kind of saying something by having that in your background, right?
True.
So it expresses something about your culture, about what you value, about how other people should perceive you, and memetics is really just studying that. And the really cool thing about AI is that prior to AI, it was really expensive to do these types of studies, because if you wanted to see, like, I don't know, maybe you could do a memetic analysis of podcasters, and you could say, okay, how many of them have on air in the background, right? Like maybe it's like 10%, right? And are the people who have on air in the background performing better or worse than average? Right. So you can kind of do these correlations and start to see like, okay, what's important to have as a podcaster, what's not important to have. what type of mic are the podcasters using? Like I'm using, Blue Yeti, and you're using, is that Riverside?
It's actually a
Yeah,
Behringer.
yeah,
It's, Riverside,
exactly. Okay.
it's a little bit of Riverside
Yeah.
swag, but yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so swag is a meme, right? But now with AI, it's super easy to do this type of analysis because you can get the AI to tag this stuff, right? Like you can use some of the components of Stable Diffusion, which is like open source, to be able to tag different things in images. You can tag different things in customer reviews, in blog posts, and you can kind of get a sense of what are the types of memes that I should be including in my marketing campaign, and what ones should I be leaving out because they're not performing. So as I was writing the book, and I was like, it was a real slog, like trying to convince people, motivate people to do this type of analysis, and that this type of analysis is valuable. Suddenly, the cost of doing it dropped by 1,000%.
Exactly.
So like it actually kind of like I think made a lot more people interested in the topic, and I hope like it's only a self-published book, right? So I didn't need to make a lot of money from it. It's more like a passion project, something that I learned that was, I think, when I look back on my agency experience, was the key to all of our best successes at Ladder was when we did this type of mimetic analysis. So that's why I wanted to capture it in a book. But yeah, I mean, it kind of again, I was like a little bit ahead of the curve, but maybe a little bit too far ahead of the curve because it's still pretty niche. Not many people have heard of
But
it.
it's growing. It's definitely growing.
But yeah, hopefully it's growing.
And the second book, the book you're writing now.
Yeah, so like literally, I had just finished this crazy editing process. Like I had taken a whole year to write my first book, and self-published. So it didn't like it wasn't New York Times bestseller first week, right?
You still have
Still
time.
writing. But then I was doing some training for O'Reilly Media at the time, and then I had been out to a conference. They host a pretty cool conference out in San Francisco. It's like an unconference, they call it. FooConf is the name, and it's like invite only, and they figure out the agenda like there at the actual event, right? So it's a conference, but like everyone who's invited could be speaking.
Oh, cool.
And they have like Nobel laureates. They have like crazy, like they have all these authors, like pretty amazing, like researchers. They have a lot of Meta employees because of the Meta campus. I gave a talk, and a few other, and kind of met some interesting people. And I don't know if that helped my case, but then they reached out a few months later, and they were like, "Do you want to make a book on prompt engineering, on this training that you've been giving for us, this online training?" So I was like, "Yes, of course." Like. This is a real publisher doing it, get into that textbook game, like hopefully, hopefully it'll go well. But yeah, like I actually just finished writing the first draft. I'm writing with my co-author James, who I also work with on a couple of other projects. But it's on prompt engineering, kind of teaches the principles of prompt engineering. I've approached it like this management science. That I think it is.
Cool.
So it's not like 99% of people are using ChatGPT wrong, and it's not a big book.
That should be the title.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe I'm missing out on money probably by not making that the title. But I don't want to be associated with that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Mike, so just to close the loop, we started with talking about Growth Mentor. We went through sort of your stories and how like your experience have been shaping. I like to ask, and I know it's not very original, but a little advice for the people who are thinking of calling for a mentor call with you or with someone else, or they're at that stage that they need help. What will be your to-go tip that you always drop out there? For example, for me is test everything. I'm not going to tell you, yeah, that's going to work. Just test it, right? But what will be a tip that you think is super valuable in your experience to people either starting or with experience, but they're having these little moments of doubts or problems?
Yeah, good question. I like to think from first principles. So one of the really big things that helped at Ladder was, we would just break it down and say like, okay, like where is the real problem here? So the overall problem is that you're not growing fast enough, right? Like nobody is growing as fast as they want to be. But there's all sorts of components that go into that, right? Like it's do the audience know who you are? And if they know who you are, like what do they think about you? And if they think favorable things about you, then like what's stopping them from like coming to your website or checking out your product. And if they've checked out your product, is there any friction that's stopping them from continuing? Or if they've used it in the past, like what got them to stop using it? Like why they're not using it now? So every big problem is really just a series of smaller problems, and as you decompose that into the individual parts, you start to spot areas where you can actually make a difference. And rather than being overwhelmed with this big nasty problem, breaking it down into individual parts, like you actually can make some progress and feel good about that progress that you're making. And this is something I really got from learning how to code, because in software engineering, it's like a really key part of it, right? Like you just kind of in all engineering, right? Like you take a big problem, you turn it into lots of small problems, and then you check to those off, right? And it's true in AI as well, right? So first thing I'll tell you, if you're struggling with your prompt, first thing I'll tell you is like try and break it into multiple tasks. Maybe you're trying to do too many things all in one task, right? And if you break it into multiple prompts, then you can chain those prompts together, and overall, like maybe you can actually achieve something much greater than than the individual parts. So like I think that's like a universal advice, is like break it down into what are the things that really need to happen, and like what are these sub problems, and then just reason from first principles and think about like what like it's either this or it's this, right? Like can you break that down? Like either this is true, or like if that's not true, then this other thing has to be true. And if you can get it down to those fundamentals, then usually the problem becomes less overwhelming. And you might not immediately know a solution, but it feels more approachable, and you can start making more progress. So you know who you need to talk to. You know what you need to try.
Awesome, Mike. Where is your course? Is in Udemy, right?
Yeah, on Udemy. Yeah. So it's So I guess you could provide a link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
We're the first one when you go for prompt engineering. We're the top one now. We've had actually over 12,000 students take the course in 4 months. So yeah, it's actually 6,000 of them were like this month, which is kind of nuts. So yeah, AI
is going to double everything.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, it has doubled. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have to do anything else if it keeps doubling. But check it out. Like I will say it's more technical. So there is like about 30%, 40% of the material is you don't need to know how to code, but we're focused more on the technical use case there.
Cool. So I'm gonna add all of the details, all of the links, so you guys can go and check. Not only that, you can also book a call with Mike and find out more about how AI can help you and your business. So Mike, man, this is the time we have for today. We definitely going to be in touch. I'll see you around the world of Growth Mentor.
Yeah, good to talk to you, man.
Take care.
So again, another pleasure to have people like Mike in the show. And I usually, if you've been watching the show, I do a swoop when I talk about the things that I'm taking from this conversation. But this time, I want to do something different. I actually want to invite you to go and watch this all over again, because the conversation about AI and how AI is changing everything that we do, not just as professionals, but also as humans, is something that you really need to bear in mind. And I think the way Mike's puts it in there is very, very not unique, but very, very clear for you when you try to understand if AI is really going to replace you, or what's going to be the value proposition that you can have as a company using AI. It's not the automation anymore, it's you. You're going to make the difference. It's the human relationship with AI that's going to make a huge difference in the way we grow together with AI. So that being said, my swoop for today, which doesn't have the swoop, is to go back and listen to this, because it's something that is really important for all of us professionals. It doesn't matter where, if it's marketing or whatever you want to do. So watch it again, subscribe to the podcast. My name is Marcus, and I will see you next time. Cheers.